I am so excited for y'all this morning to get to hear the interview that I've got planned for Peter Williams. Peter's a very dear friend. He's a marvelous scholar. He's a man of faith and devotion. He is a man with a vision. He's a man who does so many things for the kingdom, and God uses him, and yet he still exists within a framework of humility and approachability. I hold him in greatest awe and respect among my friends. It is an honor for me to not only get to visit with him, but to call him my friend. He's very dear to me. And so would you please join me in welcoming, fresh from Cambridge, Peter Williams. I mean that. Thank you. Okay, so here we are. Now, I've interviewed Peter in this class before. If you're watching on the internet, you can go back in the archives and find it. I don't want to repeat a lot of it, but I'm always curious, and I want to make sure that we've at least got ground level knowledge, because I know there are new people who are constantly feeding into this class and rotating out of this class and everything else. So we'll do just a smidgen of background information on Peter, and then after the smidgen, we've got a lot to cover over the next 45 minutes or so. So join me in this. First of all, Peter, tell everybody a little bit about your wife and your two children.
So I've got a beautiful...
Is he mic'd up?
Let's try this. That's on.
Yeah, keep talking. You're doing good.
Beautiful wife called Catherine, and I've got a beautiful daughter, 17, who called Lena, and a beautiful son, a handsome son, who's Leo at 13. And I'm 48, and I'm glad to be here.
Thanks. Thanks for the warning, Mark.
Yeah.
We on. On. Good.
Yes. Thank you, Peter, very much. So,
sorry about the mistakes.
No. We only caught 3. And
there were many more, don't worry.
What was the piece you were playing?
That was Chopin's Ocean Etude.
The old Chopin's Ocean Etude, Bruce Tay. That was wonderful. Okay, so Peter, you play the piano. You read the Bible. You have read the Bible in substantive portions in how many languages?
11.
Read the New Testament through in 9. Mm-hmm. And then you've read in substantive portions several more. What language are you reading the Bible in right now in your personal quiet time?
Arabic.
Arabic, yes.
I don't speak Arabic, but I'm reading it.
Will you please stand up, one of our many Arabic class members? Yes, y'all applaud her. She constantly makes me Arabic food and brings it. This morning. We'll be having a party together right after class. If y'all want to join me, it's bring your own Arabic food. That's BYAB. Or BYAF. Sorry, I can't spell. I got too excited over the food. Arabic. What caused you to want to read the Bible in Arabic?
Well, the Bible's written in Hebrew in the Old Testament and Greek in the New Testament, but reading in foreign languages slows you down. And that helps you take more notice of each word. The harder work you make it for yourself, the more you're slowed down and you see things.
Okay, so first of all, the Arabic alphabet. Mm-hmm. How did you know the Arabic alphabet?
Well, it took some time to learn it. I often find with a language you need several run-ups to start.
Subtle run-ups?
Several run-ups.
Several run-ups. So I want you to walk through, because some of our class members may decide to read the Bible in Arabic next year. We've got New Year's resolutions coming up. They've got a couple weeks to get ready. Seriously, what makes you think, I think I'll try it in Arabic now?
Well, I mean, Arabic is part of a group of languages. It's actually a cousin of Hebrew. So I've done quite a few of the related languages, so that makes it easier for me. And then we're looking, and the alphabet is related to some scripts I've done before, so that all helps. But, I'm not saying it's easy. I would say if you're wanting to learn another language, try New Testament Greek, start reading the New Testament in Greek.
Okay.
Most of my administrative staff at Tyndale House, I've actually taught, they've read 2 and 3 John in Greek, 2nd and 3rd John. It's not that long.
Okay. Now, when did you realize in your life that in addition to the piano, you had this ability to do foreign languages so well?
So I was blessed at high school with being able to learn Greek and Latin there. I had great teachers, and I guess it's around 16 I realized I was better than that at than the other things, so I kept going with that.
And so which languages have you studied formally?
So I did Greek, Latin, Hebrew, and Aramaic as my undergraduate degree.
And then and help people understand the relevance of Aramaic to biblical studies.
So about half of Daniel and parts of Ezra are written in Aramaic. Aramaic and Hebrew are cousins. Also, Jesus on several occasions and maybe many more spoke Aramaic.
And you have made a name for yourself. It was an area of study to deal with Palestinian Aramaic. Is that right?
So yeah, I've mainly specialized in East Aramaic. You don't want all of the gory details, called Syriac. But suffice it to say that there are still Aramaic speakers around today, several 100,000 of them. And it's spoken where Turkey, Greece, and Syria meet. And it's possible. There are quite a lot of Bible translations into Syriac. So the church spread out west, particularly using Latin, but east, Syriac was the main language.
And you're actually doing some translation work right now for the Bible Museum in D.C., or explain?
Yeah, so I was at the Museum of the Bible on Tuesday, and one of the things we're researching at Tyndale House is actually one of their manuscripts that they have, where what happened is people reused writing material, so they rub out the underwriting and they write something else on top, and then people use fancy new technologies, multispectral imaging and so on, to read the writing that's underneath. And so I'm heading up the team deciphering the writing underneath.
So there's a manuscript, an ancient manuscript, where because of the expense involved in parchments or whatever it is they were writing on, they would scrape off
Yeah.
or bleach off some of the old writing and then sometimes turn it and write something new on top.
So what you can write on is you can write on papyrus or you can write on leather before paper gets invented, or you have to write on something hard. But papyrus goes extinct around the year 700 in Egypt because it gets over-farmed, and paper hasn't been invented in the West. They've got it in China for several hundred years. So you've got a gap between about 700 and 1200 when, if you want to write something on flexible material, I'm afraid it's animal skin. And animal skins, you think how many animal skins you're going to need to write a whole book. It's a lot. So in other words, you're asking yourself the question, do I really need this book I've currently got? If not, I might rub it out and put some new writing on it. And so that's a whole period when you get these things called palimpsests, which are overwritten manuscripts. And now modern technology is often able to read the writing underneath.
Through the wonders of our Elmo, you've used a word that a lot of us are not familiar with. Have I spelled it right?
You have.
And a palimpsest is, explain it again?
So it's something that's been rubbed out and then written on top. So we've got the word palindrome in English, and the palim is like palin. It means again, and psest is to do with rubbing.
So if I had an eraser, and I don't, I could sort of use my...
Oh, no. Oh, no. Don't play the piano now.
And then I could turn it this way,
Yeah.
and I could write something brand new.
Yeah. You got it.
And through the wonders of technology, y'all are able to take it and ignore brand new, rotate it back around, and kind of read what was underneath that's been rubbed out.
Yeah.
And so you've got a manuscript where you and Tyndale House are doing that right now.
Yeah.
And for the Museum of the Bible. So tell the ladies and gentlemen of the jury, tell us, please, what it is underneath that you're trying to read and then translate.
So when the person's making the stuff on top, someone else probably has already rubbed things out for them. So they're grabbing a pile. This one, and so on. They go through this whole leaf. And that could be, as we found, to get 130-something pages on top, they are using 11 different manuscripts. So we've got bits of books, not complete books, and we've got astronomical text. So we've got people writing about the star signs. We've got bits of Bible, which some in Aramaic, some in Greek. We've got a gospel harmony where someone has put its 2-column manuscript, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, on one page where they align for the Passion narrative, and has actually been numbering the sections to try and align them, and we think that's a work in progress, and we're able to access that. So it's tantalizing because we haven't got the full manuscripts of any of these, we've just got parts of them. So you understand that you've got 11 different, if you like, piles that have been grabbed from to get writing material for the top stuff.
Do y'all realize we've got a world's authority on? How many of you know or have heard Pastor David talk about his days of old where he studied Hebrew at Cambridge University? Has anybody ever heard Dr. Fleming say that, Pastor David? What he's referencing when he says that is, one time he and I were over in Cambridge and we went and sat in on one of Peter's Hebrew classes he was teaching. And Pastor David and I have officially put that now on our resumes, our CVs, that we studied Hebrew at Cambridge under Peter Williams for 30 minutes. And it was life-changing, I've got to tell you. But Peter, we're honored to have you here.
Great to be here.
And I got to tell you that what impresses me most about all of this is with your intellect, with your energy, and with your vision, you have a heart first and foremost for God and His kingdom. And yeah, it's a marvelous thing. I want you to tell us how God's working in your life right now.
So, been an exciting year this year. My mother got married just a month ago. She's a widow, met a widower, and it's been really amazing to see them coming together, really suited people. And I'm just seeing...
Do you like the guy?
I do, yeah.
Okay, this is on the internet. Be careful.
Andrew, I like you very much. But it's just been amazing to see God bringing things together in life. And I think, okay, I'm 48, but I've seen a lot of God working in surprising ways. And the timing of things is so perfect.
Your children, how old? Magdalena is how old?
17. 17.
And she's going to be graduating from high school. And
years
where
time.
will she go? Do we know?
She'll go somewhere really great.
So has she applied to Texas Tech already, or is?
It's funny you should say that, because I was videoing with her yesterday, and I was drinking my coffee, and she said, "Is that a Texas Tech mug?" And she was right, absolutely right. She mentioned Texas Tech yesterday. I just
Tell her we know people.
Yeah.
And yeah, and then Leo. How old is Leo now?
He's 13.
And what kinds of things is Leo interested in at 13?
I think he would like a Tesla. You asked?
Well, God bless him. And I would suggest he go to law school. What are Magdalena's interests? What kinds of things is she interested in?
Oh, she loves to read and she loves the outdoors. I mean, we all do.
All right. Tell everybody how you met your sweet wife.
So we were on mission together in Belgium, and we were there on the coast, and we're on the same team. And then, just by coincidence, but it wasn't coincidence, she was coming to the same Cambridge college that I was already at. Just by coincidence, she was assigned to the same Bible study group that I was in, and so on. And so we got to know each other.
And you've been married how long?
22 years.
I will not ask you
The pause was just for drama.
Well covered. Well played. Okay, Peter, one of the reasons you are... What brings you to the U.S. right now?
So it was for speaking at the Museum of the Bible, and also at Hobby Lobby headquarters, where I was training some of their staff about the Gospels, and obviously come here.
And we're delighted that you came here. When do you go back home?
This afternoon.
So you're on the, you will be home tomorrow.
Tomorrow morning, yeah.
Yeah, tomorrow morning. I was in Cambridge this week while Peter was here, and I had lunch with your Hebrew professor, and we discussed you. And I asked him what you were like as a student.
Oh, yeah.
Would you care to guess what he would have to say?
He was a great teacher.
He said much the same about you as a student. He said that you are always diligent and a really fine person as well as a fine student. Our class has met him before. I've interviewed him up here. Andrew McIntosh, if you remember, was Peter's Hebrew professor back in the day. Is that correct?
It is.
And it was fun to get to have lunch with him this week. Now, Peter, you turned our library onto something. You sent me an email recently and said there's an auction coming up, and in the auction it's going to be offered a Tyndale Bible, which we wanted to try to get for the library. Explain to everybody first what the Tyndale Bible is, and then we're going to talk about it because you run the Tyndale House. So first, what is the Tyndale Bible? Who was Tyndale?
So William Tyndale, born 1490, and he died 1536. And he was a great Bible translator, and he is the first person to translate the New Testament into English from the original Greek. He was someone who studied very hard, spent a lot of his life on the run, and ultimately was martyred for his work. And so he brought out the parts of the New Testament 1525, complete New Testament 1526, and then there was a second edition. And yet, a lot of these things have to be smuggled round, and so much of that is at the basis of the King James Version, and then modern translations today, things like the English Standard Version and so on, have his choice of words, words like loving kindness and so on, at their base. So he's a brilliant man.
And he was killed, I believe, in Oxford, martyred in Oxford?
No, in Belgium.
In Belgium?
Yeah. So he was on the run, and he was betrayed and caught in Antwerp. He then was imprisoned for a while. In prison, there's an amazing letter from him saying, "Please bring books so I can study more." He's, and he's obviously feeling very cold. And then, he's martyred.
And this was for translating the Bible into English in part?
That's right. That was, deeply rebellious. He wasn't allowed to do that. There's a great time when he was actually, people were confiscating his Bible, and he managed to get the Bishop of London, who didn't want his Bible, to buy up a whole load, which actually provided him with capital so he could do more. So, even through the persecution, God blessed him, and the word has gone out.
You and I were talking in the car on the ride over here about how God can be glorified through suffering. This may be a good example. Talk to us just a little bit, because different people suffer, and we all suffer in life. Explain to us a little bit about how God can be glorified through suffering.
Well, we don't know all of the things that God will bring about through any particular pain, and we don't know what wonderful delights he has prepared for those who love him. It says, "Eye has not seen, ear has not heard." And so I sometimes think about Job sitting in his suffering, thinking, why is this happening to me? And he couldn't actually understand the answer if you said, so that people in Baptist churches in Texas in 2018 could be comforted by your story. And that's just Baptist churches in Texas. There's other churches, and there's other states and other places, And the extent of how many people have drawn comfort through that is just vast. So the book ends without answering fully why he's suffering. And yet that there is a much, much bigger ongoing story of why this is happening, giving meaning to it. Now, I'm not saying we can all be comforted with that, but I think we need to be comforted with the sense that God is a good God, and God knows what he's doing. We don't know what he's doing, but whatever that situation is that you're in, God is a loving father.
So, for example, Tyndale, and I want to make sure that we're fair to some of the people who found what Tyndale was doing to be wrong. Sometimes it's portrayed that it was only the church trying to maintain its airtight grip on theology and keeping it from the masses. And there may indeed have been a political agenda going on. But there was also a concern, and this was the politically correct answer at least, but I think with many a genuine concern, that the English language was too vulgar, too common, and too base to be used to express the glories and the magnificence and the doctrines of God. And so it needed to be done in a language that God had found through his church to be appropriate and not minimizing and, in a sense, blaspheming the name of God. And so the church would punish, and the legal punishment that allowed for the death penalty was one of blasphemy. The idea that translating the Bible into common vulgar tongues was debasing who God was. And yet, we recognize the glory that has been brought to God and the unfolding of the importance of us having it in whatever vocabulary we can, such that we'll even have children's Bibles now who will take it and reduce it down to the vocabulary of a first or second grader to try to understand the gospel story. Is that an important aspect of what you see God doing in our lives today, and some of what you've done in terms of trying to best make accessible the truth of the Bible?
Yeah, I think sometimes you have to choose a side, and Tyndale chose a side. It's not that there wasn't any other case that could be made. There is a danger that you let things go out and there'll be misunderstanding and all sorts of weird sects can begin. But he was right. The word of God needed to get out. He got it out. He gave his life for that. And so much good has come from that. And I think we today need to do everything we can to get the word out. Of course, there'll be chaos. There'll be all sorts of things that happen as some people misunderstand the Bible and so on. But we need to have the confidence that God knows what he's doing. His word is there to get
So you are
out.
the head of Tyndale House.
Yep.
That's not his actual house.
No. So,
Tell us about Tyndale House.
Yeah, so we're different from Tyndale House Publishers, which began 18 years after us. It's a house in Cambridge with a big library attached, not as big or magnificent as yours, but it's where...
This is Texas. Go ahead.
But we have an amazing...
Y'all are doing fine for England. Go on.
We have an amazing collection, and of course we're understated in England as well.
So are we. Go ahead.
So we have an amazing collection of scholars who work together. There are about 50 at any day at the doctoral level or above working on researching the Bible. There is just so much to find out about the Bible. And so they're going then back out to 6 different continents serving God. And so we're privileged to be an incubator, a place which fosters scholarship like that. We're a community, residential community, and we also run projects as well.
Okay, so let's look at Tyndale House a little bit and what it does. By the way, y'all are putting out a magazine,
Yeah.
and we need to make sure that everybody knows how to get a free copy of your magazine. How can they do that electronically?
So go to tyndalehouse.com.
TYNDALE, whoops, house.com.
And you can sign up there. It's very simple for the free magazine. And there it is. And it's going to be 3 times a year. And it's going to be about exciting Bible scholarship for lay people. So do have a look at that.
Okay, and next time you come, maybe you could bring us a few hundred copies we could hand out.
Yeah.
That would be great.
Yeah.
And so Tyndale House, so that people have an idea, I want to break it apart a little bit. Give us some names we might have heard of that have gone through and used Tyndale House as a place of study and ministry.
So D.A. Carson spent about 9 years of his life there, Don Carson. Wayne Grudem, about 4.5 years. I think John Piper was there for 6 months. We've had John Stott there. Donald Wiseman, who was the great Assyriologist, discovered a lot, worked with Agatha Christie. We've got all sorts of, people. Leon Morris, the best-selling theologian in Australia, again, spent time with us, actually leading the institution. And you've had Simon Gathercole here, I think, so he can be added to the number. Lots.
The work that people do there also spans in age. Mm-hmm. So right now, of the 40, 50 scholars you've got there, what's the youngest, or who's the youngest in approximate years, and who's the oldest?
So the youngest would be probably early 20s, and the oldest would be about 70.
70. So anybody who's about 70 needs to get ready to go over to Tyndale House and do some work.
Well, not everyone all at once, and we're fairly booked up, but having said that, we welcome those who really want to do serious study of the Bible, and it's a great environment to do that.
You need to expand your campus then.
Yeah, and also, absolutely we need to expand our campus, yeah.
Okay, so anybody who wants to write a big check, you can expand your campus?
Yep, absolutely. Just talk to me.
It's an amazing ministry. It's an amazing work, and I want to get into this book for a little bit, which we've got a copy for everybody on. But I want to preface it by this: I think people are sometimes shocked to find out that at some of the leading schools in the world, those who are charged with teaching the New Testament, the Old Testament, the languages in which they were written, oftentimes do not believe in the faith itself, oftentimes would not be claiming themselves to be even believers in God. Have you found that to be true as well?
Yes, so I think, in universities and colleges everywhere, you find debates, and people will debate economics, they'll debate everything, and it's also the same about the Bible. And there are plenty of scholars who are pretty skeptical about the Bible and about religion, and part of that is partaking of what's going on in the entire culture, but part of it is also leading that. So I think that in some sense what we're seeing in China is a growth in the Christian faith. What we're seeing in the West and in America is some shrinking of confidence in Scripture. And the funny thing is, I think that the shrinking of confidence in Scripture is happening simultaneously with the rise in evidence for the Scriptures. So it shows there's no direct correlation between the amount of evidence and what people believe.
You've debated Bart Ehrman on the reliability of the Gospels, at least, or what did you debate him on?
We debated on the reliability of the text of the New Testament, the manuscript and so on.
And people can, I'm sure, see that on YouTube or somewhere. But what caused you to write this book, Can We Trust the Gospels?
Well, I've been thinking about writing this for about 22 years since I first started speaking on the subject, and I thought there's really a gap for a small book which people can hand out to their friends who are first asking this question. If we want people to trust Jesus, then the very first question you've got to ask is, do we have reliable sources about Jesus? And so that may be a question for people, and I want this book to be able to plug that gap. So it mustn't be too long. I just got it to 38,000 words. I wanted it to be even slightly shorter than that, but that's where we landed. And it's seeking to make sure you've got complete documentation of things. So if anyone's skeptical, they can check out any of my references.
Okay, so at the time of Jesus, let's look in the first 30 years of this era.
Yeah.
All right. We've got Jesus, and we can read about Jesus in a number of places, but notably, we're talking about Jesus, reading about him in the Gospels. Fair? So we've got the Gospels for Jesus. Who would you say was one of, if not the, most famous people within the Roman Empire, the civilized world of the West, at the time of Jesus?
Well, I'd say it has to be the Roman emperor, who's Tiberius. He reigns from the year 14 to the year 37. So Tiberius ought to be the most famous.
And he is the Caesar.
Yep.
So emperor
Yep.
Tiberius Caesar.
Yep.
ruler of the Roman Empire.
Yep.
How do you know?
That Tiberius existed.
Well, I mean, how do you know Tiberius Caesar was the emperor and ruler of the Roman Empire?
Yeah, it's a great question, because a lot of this sort of stuff does depend on the written sources you have, which come from quite a bit later. Now, there are coins that you have for Tiberius, so you could say you can add the coinage in and you can add the inscriptions in. But would you be able to put all the coins in the right order if you didn't have the historical records telling you which Caesars come in which order? So we sort of take these things as facts. We take them, you read them in all the textbooks, but actually we've got to remember, we believe that because we're trusting historical records. And so it begins with the fact that our culture already has lots of trust in records handed down from a long time ago.
Okay, but Tiberius Caesar, yeah, you find his face on a coin, or his name on a coin.
Yep.
You might find his name on a pillar.
Yep.
Something like that. But if we want to know narrative about
Yeah.
him, good Caesar, bad Caesar,
Yeah.
did he invent the salad dressing or the salad, we want
Yeah,
some
sure.
details
Oh,
about the
important
guy.
stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. Where are we going to get that?
So you've got Velleius Paterculus.
Hang on. We just happen to have a slide.
Oh, yeah.
If we go to the PowerPoint.
And so we've got Tacitus, we've got Suetonius, we've got Dio Cassius, or Cassius Dio. And are they all on the screen? Yeah, they are. So there we went through, who are the four main sources? So it's four main sources about the most famous guy in the Roman Empire, four main sources about Jesus. How many words have they each got in them? Well, you can see the number of words in the second column. It looks like Tacitus has got a lot, but Tacitus's Annals is not mainly about Tiberius. It's mainly about the time of Tiberius.
Okay, I'm
rather
going to
about the guy
interrupt you
himself.
for just a moment because in Texas, sometimes we talk a little slower than you do.
Oh, okay, yeah.
So I want to make sure that we detail this
Yeah, sure.
for those of us who are slow to listen and quick to speak.
As you know, I have a Texas accent.
So we did an interview in Jersey Village. Dear sweet lady named Lillian in the class over there at Jersey Village when we were over there before we came here. And she talked to Peter for just a second or two. But she said to him, she was greeting him before class, she said, "Now, are you from Texas?" And he talked a little more and she realized he wasn't. Okay, so Velleius Paterculus is the one who has written, he wrote AD 30.
That looks good, doesn't it?
Yeah, so he's a contemporary.
Yeah. The only thing is, he's in the pay of Tiberius only to say good things about him. So of all the four records, he's actually thought generally to be the least reliable. And he probably stops writing in AD 30 because he says something that the emperor doesn't like and he kills him.
There is a fellow that works at the Lanier law firm. His name is Johnny Cargill. Yeah. Johnny's in charge of saying good things about me. That's his job. I pay him to do that. And if he ever said something that wasn't good, I'd fire him like that. Not really, but maybe. So this is a fellow who's getting paid to do this, to write. He's the PR man for Tiberius. Okay, we got him. Next, Tacitus.
So Tacitus is, he's writing 70, 80 years after the events. And he's a good source, pretty negative about Tiberius.
Okay, but you've got here this column, earliest copy.
Yeah.
What does that mean?
So the earliest copies of these are, literally the earliest manuscript. For Velleius Paterculus is 16th century. For the others, it's 9th century. So it's a long time after the events.
Okay, so if we go back to the Elmo for a moment. Our written sources for Tiberius, the oldest copies we've got, date from somewhere in the 800s to the 1500s. And the people actually writing is the PR man, who's the contemporary,
Yep.
and the others are 80 plus years later.
Yeah.
Okay. We're on all fours here?
Yep.
Okay, go back to the PowerPoint, please. Next slide that you've got, boom, there, are the sources about Jesus so that we can compare them?
So when you look at the number of words, firstly, there's on the whole a bit more. There's also the manuscripts are a lot earlier, whether we're looking at complete copies or partial copies, they're earlier.
All right, so if we go back to the Elmo, by the way, we've got some incredible people upstairs who switch back and forth, really do a good job. Kudos to you guys. Copies, we've got copies that go back to the, if we're talking about just fragments, the fragment of John, the John Rylands papyrus, we've got them in the 100s through the, up to current almost, fragments, and then basically full manuscripts we've got from the 300s. Fair?
Yep.
Now, this leaves the question of how early were the authors? Were they contemporaries or something like that?
And one thing I try in my book is not to say when the gospel writers wrote, but I start with dates given by non-Christian scholars and say, hey, that's better than Tiberius. And anyway, it's probably earlier than they're saying. There's a slide where it
let's go,
that.
go back to the PowerPoint for a moment. So you've got a slide on this.
Yeah.
The Jewish annotated New Testament.
Yeah, that's a group of Jewish scholars, great Jewish scholars who come together and they give dates which are, later than I would give, but they are still closer to the events than you see with the most famous guy of the Roman Empire, Tiberius.
Yeah, I mean, they give the dates for Mark anywhere as early as 30 years after the crucifixion, 40 years for John, 50 years for Matthew at the early end. And Shane Cohen is?
He's a great Jewish scholar, wrote from the Maccabees to the Mishnah, and again, he's giving similar dates. Bart Ehrman, a more skeptical guy, an agnostic. But again, even there, we're using, America's top New Testament skeptics' dates, and it's still earlier than Tiberius.
So if we go back to the Elmo, for Jesus and the accounts we've got on his, and by the way, I left out the fact that there are lots more words, lots more written, and what we're looking at, where lots more was written, includes people who are writing somewhere between 30 to 70 years after the events. And that's by the scholars who don't agree.
So there are lots of conservative scholars who try and make a case here and there for earlier dates. I'm not interested in going there. I think that I prefer earlier dates, but I'm looking at what we can actually demonstrate.
Okay, so it seems to me, just looking at the chart that we've made, that we've got lots more written about Jesus than the most famous person of the Roman Empire in the day.
Yep.
That we've got multiple gospels, multiple written sources. Our copies predate the copies we've got of Caesar by almost 1,000 years. That it's written by people much closer to the events, save for the PR guy. Is this fair so far?
Absolutely.
All right, so within your book, beyond this, you look at evidence to show whether or not there is accuracy within the records that we've got of Jesus, right?
Yep.
Give us your most compelling arguments.
So one of them is just the places they know. There's some slides about this, and what you can see is lots and lots of town names that they are familiar with. They also know village names, so again, that seems to suggest that they have local knowledge. I looked at all the possible sources they could have for this, so could they have got it out of books? And none of the books that they could have access to would actually have all of the place names that they have. So they don't just know that, they know where the land goes up and down. So when they say someone goes down from Cana to Capernaum or from Nazareth to Capernaum, they know the topography of the land, the ups and downs, traveling times, little villages, they know things.
Okay, we're going to experiment for a moment. Class participation. How many of y'all know where Muleshoe, Texas is and could locate it on a map? Okay. A couple of y'all have clearly been to Lubbock. How many of y'all know where Spring, Texas is and could locate it on a map? Gee, you must live nearby. How many of y'all know where Niena, Alaska is and could locate it on a map?
One.
Okay, one guy, 2, 3, 4. Y'all watch Life Below Zero too? That's where I saw it. Okay, so what's the point of that? Explain to us why it makes a difference that we would look to see about all of the locations that are given within these gospel accounts.
Well, one thing you're trying to do is work out the profile of the people who wrote the Gospels. So I'm looking at their knowledge profile, and their knowledge profile is they are really familiar with the land. So either they've spent lots of time in the land, or they've had really, really detailed conversations with people in the land.
Can you turn his mic up just a little bit? I'm having trouble hearing him, but that may just be because I listen to too much rock music.
And I'm also looking beyond the geography to how they know the tax systems, they know the cultures, they know Judaism, they know the customs, they know the names that people are called, all of these things.
All right, if we go to the PowerPoint, let me pull a slide up that we've got here some of the towns. Arimathea, Bethany, Bethphage, Bethsaida, Capernaum, Dalmanutha, Emmaus, Ephraim, Nain.
I mean, some of these are big places like Jerusalem, but a lot of them are small. How does someone even get that knowledge of where these are?
The internet wasn't that, I mean, Al Gore
Not very
invented
advanced. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't around
Yeah.
yet, was it?
Yeah, America didn't exist.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Shameless plug on the fact that the Romans invaded Britain to access the tin mines in the South. That
good.
was shameless.
Yeah.
That was
Shall I
shameless.
just tell you, Tacitus said about my country, it is permanently covered by cloud. So, there you are.
Yeah. Okay, so do you remember what the Romans called London? What the name of it was?
Yeah, sometimes Londinium, but there's another one as well.
Yeah, Lugdunum.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's all right. I took British history at Texas Tech. So the gospel writers' references to towns, I mean, they didn't have the internet. They didn't have Eusebius's atlas even. I mean, where are they going to get these town names to put the obscure town for Luke to talk about the widow of Nain's son being brought back from the dead?
Yeah, I think the most natural thing is that they are people who live in the land, or they've done loads of interviews with people who have.
All right, beyond just the cities themselves, we've got the regions, the Decapolis, from the word 10 cities.
Yep.
What is the Decapolis, and why would that matter?
You look at the Sea of Galilee and go east from that, then you've got this area which is more pagan. It's where the pigs go down into down the hill into the lake, and Jesus travels there as well, so it gives them access to Greek speaking that's certainly there, and the gospel writers know about that, and they get the culture right. I mean, that story about the pigs, it's set in the Decapolis exactly where it's not so Jewish, and therefore you have pigs. You know, it's that sort of knowledge which is just shown all the time in the Gospels. Yeah.
You wouldn't expect a story about pigs rushing down the hillside in Jerusalem. Understood. Beyond the regions, the bodies of water, same principle?
Yeah, so I mean, with the Sea of Galilee, they've got very specific knowledge that you get windstorms. They're not talking about rainstorms, they're windstorms. They know where the other side of the lake is. The other side is defined not by Google Earth, but by the other side if you're a Galilean fisherman looking over to the other side. Matthew and Mark call it the sea, but Luke, who actually probably lived near the Mediterranean, calls it the lake, because it is just,
It's a lake.
It's a lake. So all of that sort of perspective we get. They know about boating there. They know about fishing. But they also know about the Pool of Siloam near Jerusalem. They know about other bodies of water. They get that sort of thing correct.
Yeah. Okay. References to other places. The Field of Blood, Gabbatha,
Yeah.
Gethsemane, Golgotha, the Mount of Olives, the Sheep Gate, Solomon's Colonnade. Tell us about that.
So what we're finding is that they know their way around Jerusalem, the gospel writers, and obviously something like the Mount of Olives is quite a big thing. And you get the specific knowledge that there's the Mount of Olives, but they also have the mention of Gethsemane. Now, the interesting thing about Gethsemane is not mentioned outside the Gospels. And yet, when you go through this word Gethsemane, it's got two parts, Geth, which is some sort of press, and Semene, which is olive oil. And nowhere do they bring out the meaning of that. They just happen to have somewhere where you're pressing olive oil and it's set on, the Mount of Olives. And so it's the fact that they have the local language. How would someone who lives a long way away know what a local would call it? So they get the correct local name. So it's even things that are so obscure they're not able to be looked up. And so there are two gardens you get mentioned. The other one is the garden at the resurrection, where, again, archaeological evidence seems to suggest that there is actually a garden. So you get two specific gardens which are mentioned in the New Testament in an amazing piece of local knowledge.
Another thing that I found really interesting as we look through this are the exact speech slide that you've got of drawing from a well. So, and you've got it in a monitor there if that helps you, but explain to all of us, please, why this is, to me, this is a huge part of the integrity of these Gospels. So explain it, please.
So often, let's say you go to a funeral and you remember stories about the deceased, and you often share stories with people, and you're sharing different stories, but they have the same traits, same character traits. Well, we get things like that in the Gospels, and this is actually about one particular event. In Matthew, Jesus is reported as praying that he wouldn't have to go through the crucifixion. And the words he used is, "Father, if it's possible, let this cup pass from me." It's quite an unusual phrase for that. That's not reported in the other Gospels with the word cup, but in John, as they go to arrest Jesus in the garden, and Peter tries to intervene, he says, "Shan't I drink the cup the Father's given me?" Now, this is amazing. Why would he use the word cup at that point? Well, because he had cup on the mind. It's a simple explanation. And so you get these two accounts which are actually reporting, one thing that happens shortly after the other, and the exact wording seems to match. So in other words, the simplest explanation, the one that will do the most work, is actually to suggest that this is historically true. Jesus actually said the word cup.
Okay, a second example that you use is this one after the resurrection.
So at the resurrection, the accounts of Matthew and John are really quite different. In Matthew, angel comes down, scares away the guards. They go off into town. Then along come the women. They see him seated on the stone that's rolled away. He informs them. They then run away and meet Jesus. In John, Mary Magdalene goes to the tomb while it's still dark and sees the stone rolled away, runs back and says, "We don't know where they've laid him," implying there's more than just her. Then two disciples run to the tomb. They look in, see nothing. Mary gets back to the tomb. She looks in, sees the two gentlemen who tell her about Jesus being risen, and she turns around and sees the gardener, who happens to be Jesus. So they're quite different accounts, but they're the same on the level of empty tomb first, meeting Jesus next. But then they have these matches on tiny things. So in Matthew, the women run away from seeing the angel, and it says they came and saw Jesus, and they took hold of his feet. In John, Jesus says, "Do not cling on to me," implying touch. In Matthew, Jesus then immediately says, "Go and tell my brothers to go to Galilee," and that clearly doesn't mean his physical brothers, it means his disciples, because it talks about later in the passage about the 11 going to Galilee. So that's an unusual phrase to use to refer to his disciples. But we have exactly the same in John, where he says to Mary, "I've not yet ascended to the Father, but go to my brothers and tell them I'm ascending to my Father and your Father." Of course, they've got the same Father, therefore they're brothers. There's a logic to it. And we get this match. So again, amidst all you've got they agree on the big things, the resurrection accounts. They've got differences at the middle level, and then they agree on these tiny things. And to me, that's exactly what I'd expect with true reporting, as I'm sure you'd experience from law.
Yeah, within the legal framework, the easiest way to tell if 3 or 4 people are making up their story and have done this conspiracy to figure it out is they all use the exact same language and say the exact same thing. If you've got 3 or 4 people describing a car wreck with the exact same language, the exact same perspective, you know they got together ahead of time and coordinated their story. It just doesn't happen otherwise. Otherwise, you've got one person who says it from their perspective of what they saw and what was important to them, and somebody else who thinks something else is important, still gets the car wrecked the same. It was still this car against that car, ran the red light, but one finds something else important from a different perspective, or one hears someone say something and doesn't need to repeat what's already been said, just needs to tie in occasionally to give additional detail that had been left out. All of that kind of stuff are marks of authenticity from a legal perspective. All right, we are out of time, and I want to announce a couple of closing announcements and say a blessing over the class. This is the good news is you'll get one of Peter's books for free. There should be enough for one per family. The bad news is I've got to whisk Peter away to get his luggage and things, to get him to the airport, so he cannot stay here and sign them or greet you. And I apologize about that. He is one of the most gracious people in the world. I wish that you had a chance to visit with him more, but I will impose on him, and God willing, get him to come back where we've got a little bit more time next time. So will you join me in saying thank you? I've also got a daughter I've got to get to the airport as well. So Rachel, get ready, honey. We got to go. So we're going to have to scoot out of here. Get a copy of the book, read it, go to Amazon.com, 5 stars. I'll see you next Sunday, God willing. I will have copies of your Torah devotional for next year, and we'll discuss Advent and have Advent. I've got some fun things planned. So can I say a blessing over you in the name of Jesus, and then we'll leave. Father, we do come in the name of Jesus, and we ask your blessings upon all ears that hear, and ask you to bless with grace, with faith, with intelligence and renewed minds. Those of us who seek to understand you. And Father, those that do not seek to understand you, I pray that you will interrupt their thoughts. And that you will be glorified by what we think, by what we say, by how we live. You are a God worthy of all of our praise and devotion. And through Jesus Christ, we offer it to you. Amen.